Hi everybody. In this video, I'm just going to show you an example of how to introduce lists to your adventure game and use lists to keep track of a sort of inventory of items that can actually have some impact on how the game plays out. This will just be a really simple example just to show the basics of how you could create a list and use a couple of list blocks to work with them to make the list items actually have some sort of impact on how the game actually works. So here's my example. I only have a few sort of decision points in this adventure game, but when you start, you're in a forest and you're lost and you just have to choose which direction to go. Originally I had it just set up where all you could do is just pick one or the other. You could pick one of two options, and that was kind of it. What I can do instead is I actually added on a few additional components. I added a third button that allows you to investigate. You'll see when that button turns on. So button 3, I set button 3 to investigate. The button 3.text to investigate, and that'll have to do with possibly if that'll allow you to possibly find items if there are items around. And you could also have some sort of like penalty for investigating in a situation where it turns out to be a bad idea. So, and that way you're not just always finding items. But anyway, as far as how the items work, let's say normally you go left, there's a cabin, you just try to keep on walking past the cabin. There's a little bit of lag here, but it says storm rolls in overnight and you freeze to death. So bad outcome. So if I go back to the beginning and I start over, and instead I go the other way and maybe I investigate down by the river, and it says I find a key. You see there's some code here that says if the current scene is a river, and when button 3 is clicked and that's true, that means you were at that scene. And you click the investigate button because that's what button 3 is. So what it does is it just has a label pop up that says you find a key. It's added to your items, and then it adds with this add block, add items to lists, the items list, and add the item key. So what I did was I created an empty list of items, and this list can have things added to it as you get them. So in this case, I just added a key to my items list. So now that I find it, it says you find a key, it's added to your items. Great. Now I could turn back. Maybe I go the other way, and this time I knock on the door to the cabin. Probably should add, looks like it says storm rolls in overnight, and this time you're nice and cozy in the cabin. I think I should add a little bit of extra text to that. A storm rolls in overnight, or before I say that, I'll say, because it said knock, nobody answers, you try the key you found, you are able to walk in. So now if I go back, let me restart. Right, if I find that key, and then I go back to the same spot where if I had tried knocking before, nothing would have happened. If I knock now, well, nobody answers, but you try the key you found, you're able to walk in, snowstorm rolls overnight, but you are nice and cozy in the cabin. In the morning, the cabin owner arrives and takes you to safety. Great, you survived you survived being lost in the woods. So the point there is that you can have these list items change what happens in the exact same scene. just by checking with an if statement if some item is in the list. If I had just gone straight ahead and knocked on the door to the cabin, I have it cut straight to my the snowstorm, but you don't make it in. Again, if I flesh this out more, I should probably add some more description, or maybe a slight variation on that ending, where it's clear that you try knocking on the door, nobody answers, you aren't able to get in, and you lose. Tough luck. But you can see the point is I did the same actions and I got the same results. I did the same actions, but I got different results depending on whether I had a key or not. You kind of do a similar situation. Maybe you go to a different spot and you investigate and you could find a bag of food and you add food, and maybe later having food matters. You could also potentially lose items. So maybe there's a spot where there's this one scene that I set up where you're at a river. Maybe you try to cross the river. And in that case, if you try to cross the river, maybe if you had food in your bag, the food gets all soggy and ruined, and that's a problem later. And in that case, you could go to lists, and you could maybe remove I have this in the wrong order. Wait, no. Oh, index. I don't want that. It looks like I can't look. It looks like I can't remove list items directly based on their name of the item. So I would have to remove. By index. So I'd have to find the index of food. So I'd have to get the index first. Index in list. Of food. And I should probably only try to do this if food is in there in the first place. Because if you try to remove something that's not there, it'll cause an error. So I would need to say if is in list food. Okay, so if food is in the items list, remove from the items list the index number of food, because you have to remove things by a number. As far as I could tell, you can't remove things by name, or like by just listing the item. So where would all what this does is if food is in the items list, it removes it. I could do that if maybe you try to cross the river. So I would find the spot in my code where I'm trying to cross the river. Let's see, is that button 2? I find my river. Cross is button 1. So if you try to cross the river, find button 1, river. I have a scene, river crossing. Right here, I set the scene to river crossing. So did I create that scene yet? I'll have to create the scene. And what I can do is set it up to have different things happen. For example, if food is in my list, I can have the label say, your food was ruined. Else, I could set this to, you made it across the river without any trouble. But you know, maybe again, as you expand this game, there's all kinds of different decisions you have to make and different things things to set up. So I'd also have to set some new buttons and what could possibly happen with what's going to happen with the buttons, and new images. What am I going to use to depict what this next decision point is. But the whole idea here is just you can expand on this game by having a list. In this case, I just called my list items. When I want to add items to the list because of something that happened, I just add it to the list using an add items block with the name of the list and the name of the item. When I want to check to see if an item is there for some reason, because maybe it has some impact on how the game responds, I would say if that item, name the item, name the list. If the item is in the list, do one thing. If it's not, do a different thing. If you have the key, you get into the cabin and you have another scene in the cabin. If you don't, you get to an ending that's like a losing state in the game where you freeze and you lose. And you can have potentially, you could lose items. If you have an item and something bad happens, you can remove it from the list. Each time I do one of these, I have a label that's set. Every time I modify the list, I make sure that there's something in the user interface that makes it clear. I say your food was ruined, or I say a key was added to your items. It's important to make sure the user interface reflects what's happening sort of behind the scenes in the data. So that's a sort of a quick crash course in how to expand this with lists. I hope that's helpful. See you next time.